Victoria Hayes stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse apartment, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of orange and pink. She held a cup of chamomile tea, now cold, that she had made an hour ago. Richard Thornton, her husband of 5 years, sat on the leather sofa behind her, eyes glued to his laptop screen. The silence between them had become so normal that Victoria sometimes forgot what their conversations used to sound like. She remembered the early days when Richard would ask about her painting hobby, when he would laugh at her jokes, when he made her feel seen. But somewhere along the way, she had become furniture in his life. Present, but unnoticed. Necessary, but unappreciated, the charity event that evening. They attended the annual Wilson Foundation Gala at the Crystal Ballroom Hotel. Victoria wore a deep emerald dress that she had carefully selected, hoping Richard might compliment her. He barely glanced her way as they left the apartment. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and designer gowns. Victoria followed Richard through the crowd as he networked with business partners and investors. She smiled when introduced, made polite conversation when required, and otherwise remained in the background. This had become her role over the years. The perfect accessory to his success. The public humiliation, Carolyn Winters. A friend from Victoria's college days approached with genuine warmth in her eyes. Victoria felt relief wash over her at seeing a friendly face. "Victoria, you look absolutely stunning tonight. That color is perfect on you," Carolyn said, embracing her. "Thank you, Carolyn." "It means so much to hear that," Victoria replied, her voice soft with gratitude. Richard turned from his conversation, inserting himself into their exchange. "Stunning might be a stretch. Victoria tends to blend into the background, which I suppose works for someone of her limited social skills." The words hit Victoria like ice water. Caroline's expression shifted from shock to pity. Several people nearby stopped their conversations, glancing over with uncomfortable expressions. "Richard, that seems a bit harsh," Carolyn said carefully. "Honest." "Not harsh," Richard corrected, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. Victoria never really learned how to command a room. She lacks the confidence that comes naturally to some people. I have accepted that about her. The weight of years Victoria stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she worried others might hear it. This was not new. Richard had been chipping away at her self-worth for years with comments disguised as observations, criticisms framed as honesty. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way Caroline looked at her with sympathy. Maybe it was the realization that she had spent 5 years shrinking herself to fit into the small space Richard had assigned her. Maybe it was simply that she had reached her limit. "Excuse me," Victoria said quietly. Walking toward the balcony before the tears could fall, the night air felt sharp against her skin. She gripped the marble railing, taking deep breaths. Behind her, the party continued with laughter and music, a world she no longer felt part of. She had given Richard everything. Her time, her energy, her confidence, her dreams. She had put her art career on hold when he said it made her seem unfocused. She had stopped seeing friends when he implied they were beneath his social circle. She had made herself smaller and quieter, hoping that would finally make him love her. The decision, but Richard did not love her. Victoria understood that now with painful clarity. He loved what she represented. The beautiful wife who did not challenge him, the supportive partner who never demanded attention, the silent companion who made him look good without requiring effort in return. She pulled out her phone and searched for apartments near downtown. Something small and affordable. Something that would be entirely hers. As she scrolled through listings, she felt a spark of something she had not experienced in years. Hope. The confrontation when they returned home that night. Victoria went straight to the bedroom and began pulling clothes from the closet. Richard followed, loosening his tie with an expression of mild annoyance. "What are you doing?" he asked, watching her fold a blouse into her suitcase. "I am leaving. I want a divorce," Victoria said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. Richard laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "A divorce. Victoria, stop being dramatic. You have everything here. This lifestyle, this apartment, the security I provide. Where would you even go?" Anywhere that I am not treated like I am worthless, Victoria replied, placing another item in her suitcase. His amusement faded, replaced by cold irritation. You think you can survive without me? You have not worked in 5 years. You have no connections. No prospects. You will come crawling back within a month. Victoria zipped her suitcase and turned to face him directly. I would rather struggle and have my dignity than stay here and lose myself completely. Fine, leave, Richard said, crossing his arms. But do not expect me to be waiting when you fail. I will move on easily enough. I am counting on it, Victoria said softly. She picked up her suitcase, her purse, and one small painting she had completed years ago. A sunset over the ocean, full of colors and light. She had stopped painting after Richard called it a waste of time, but looking at it now, she remembered the woman who created it. The woman who believed in beauty and possibility, the woman she was going to become again. Victoria walked out of the penthouse without looking back, leaving behind the life that had slowly suffocated her. The elevator ride down felt like descending from a prison tower. When she stepped onto the street, the night air felt different, fresher, full of potential. She did not know what came next. But for the first time in 5 years, that uncertainty felt like freedom. Victoria spent her first night in a small hotel room, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. The doubt crept in during those dark hours, whispering that maybe Richard was right. Maybe she could not make it on her own. But when morning light filtered through the thin curtains, something shifted inside her. She was free, truly free for the first time in years. Within a week, Victoria found a modest studio apartment in a neighborhood filled with art galleries and coffee shops. The space was tiny compared to the penthouse, but it had large windows that filled the room with natural light. She set up her easel by the window and began painting again. The brush felt foreign in her hand at first, like greeting an old friend after years of silence. But slowly, the movements came back to her. The colors began to flow. Rebuilding from scratch money was tight. The savings Victoria had hidden away would not last forever. She needed income, but returning to her previous career felt impossible. Richard had made sure of that, spreading quiet words to former colleagues that painted her as unstable and unreliable. She discovered this when 3 promising job interviews ended with sudden rejections and awkward explanations. Instead of giving up, Victoria decided to bet on herself. She created a website showcasing her artwork and began taking commissions for custom pieces. She posted her paintings on social media, sharing the stories behind each piece. The response was slow at first, but gradually people began noticing her work. A small gallery in the downtown arts district agreed to display 3 of her paintings. Victoria worked long hours, painting during the day and working part-time at a bookstore in the evenings to cover rent. She was exhausted most days, but it was a different kind of tired than what she had felt in her marriage. This exhaustion came from building something real, something that belonged entirely to her. An unexpected meeting 3 months after leaving Richard. Victoria attended the opening night at the gallery displaying her work. She wore a simple black dress, nothing like the expensive gowns that filled her old closet. Her hair was pulled back in a casual twist, and she wore minimal makeup. She felt nervous as she stood near her paintings. Watching people pause to look at them, a man in a charcoal gray suit stopped in front of her largest piece, a painting of a woman emerging from stormy waters into sunlight. He studied it for several minutes, his expression thoughtful and engaged. "This is remarkable," he said, turning to Victoria. "The way you captured the transition from darkness to light, it feels personal." "Like a story, it is personal," Victoria admitted. "I painted it during a difficult transition in my life." "Shows," he said, extending his hand. "I am Nathan Pierce. I own Pierce Innovations downtown." Victoria recognized the name immediately. Nathan Pierce had built a technology company from nothing and was known in the business community as both brilliant and humble. She shook his hand, surprised by the genuine interest in his eyes. "Victoria Hayes, I am glad you connected with the piece." A different kind of connection. Nathan purchased the painting that evening. But more importantly, he asked if Victoria would be interested in creating custom artwork for his company's new headquarters. The commission would be substantial, enough to give her financial stability for months. They met for coffee the following week to discuss the project. Victoria expected a brief business meeting, but their conversation stretched for 2 hours. Nathan asked about her artistic process, her inspiration, her vision for the pieces. He listened when she spoke, really listened, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. He shared stories about building his company, the failures that taught him resilience, the moments of doubt that nearly broke him. "You remind me of myself a few years ago," Nathan said as they prepared to leave. "Someone who had to lose everything to discover what they were really capable of." Victoria felt something flutter in her chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. Not just attraction, though Nathan was undeniably handsome with his warm brown eyes and easy smile. It was the feeling of being seen. Actually seen growth and recognition over the following months. Victoria threw herself into creating the series for Nathan's company. She painted during the day, met with Nathan weekly to show her progress, and continued building her reputation in the local art community. Her work began appearing in more galleries. Art collectors started requesting her pieces. A lifestyle magazine featured her in an article about emerging artists, transforming personal pain into powerful creativity. Nathan became a constant presence in her life, though neither of them rushed to define what was developing between them. He attended her gallery showings, always standing slightly to the side, watching her interact with admirers, with a soft smile on his face. They had dinner together twice a week, conversations flowing easily between them about art, business, life, dreams. One evening, after a particularly successful gallery opening, Nathan walked Victoria back to her apartment. The autumn air was crisped, leaves skittering across the sidewalk. "Can I tell you something?" Nathan said, pausing at her building's entrance. "Of course," Victoria replied, her heart beating faster. "Watching you these past months has been incredible. Not just your art, though that speaks for itself, but watching you rebuild yourself, claim your space in the world, refuse to let anyone dim your light again. You are extraordinary, Victoria. I hope you know that." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes, but they were good tears. Healing tears. "I am learning to believe it." Nathan reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "For what it is worth, I have believed it since the moment I saw your painting. The woman who created that kind of beauty and honesty deserves to be cherished, not diminished." The glow of confidence Victoria's transformation was not just external, though people certainly noticed the change. She carried herself differently now, her shoulders back, her head high. She smiled more freely, laughed without holding back. The woman who had once made herself invisible now commanded attention. Simply by being authentically herself, her artwork reflected this evolution. The newer pieces glowed with vibrant colors and bold composition. Critics praised her unique voice and emotional depth. Collectors competed for her work. She hired an agent to manage the increasing demand for commissions. But the most significant change was internal. Victoria no longer measured her worth by someone else's opinion. She no longer shrunk herself to make others comfortable. She had learned that real love did not require her to be less than she was. Real love celebrated her fullness, her complexity, her light. Nathan showed her what that kind of love looked like. Patient and respectful, encouraging and supportive. He never tried to fix her or change her. He simply appreciated who she was and gave her space to continue growing. The observation what Victoria did not know was that Richard had been watching her rise from a distance. He saw the magazine article. He heard through mutual acquaintances about her success. He drove past her gallery opening one night and saw her through the window, radiant and confident, surrounded by admirers. He saw Nathan Pierce standing beside her, looking at her with obvious admiration. Richard stood outside in the shadows, watching the woman he had dismissed glow with happiness and success. And for the first time, something cracked in the armor of his arrogance. A small voice whispered that maybe he had been wrong. Maybe he had thrown away something precious because he was too blind to see its value. But it was too late now. Victoria had moved on, blooming in ways he never allowed. The question was whether Richard could face what he had lost. 6 months after Victoria left, Richard found himself at the Continental Business Summit. an annual event bringing together entrepreneurs and investors. He attended every year, using it as an opportunity to expand his network and close deals. This year felt different, though. His assistant had canceled on him last minute, leaving him to navigate the event alone. He found himself feeling strangely isolated in the crowded convention center. Richard was reviewing the speaker schedule when he heard a familiar laugh. His head snapped up, and across the exhibition hall, he saw Victoria. She stood near a display booth, speaking animatedly with a group of business owners. But this was not the Victoria he remembered. She wore a tailored burgundy blazer over cream trousers, her hair styled in loose waves that framed her face. She radiated confidence, gesturing expressively as she spoke, her entire presence commanding attention. His heart stuttered in his chest. This could not be the same woman who had shuffled quietly behind him at events, who had made herself invisible to avoid his criticism. Yet there she was, transformed into someone magnetic and self-assured. The display of success. Richard moved closer, staying out of her line of sight, and read the banner above the booth. Hayes Creative Studio, custom artwork for corporate spaces. Several of her paintings were displayed on easels, each piece stunning in its use of color and emotion. Business cards and brochures sat on the table, along with a portfolio showcasing completed projects. A middle-aged woman in an expensive suit approached Victoria's booth. "Ms. Hayes, I attended your exhibition last month at the Riverside Gallery. Your work is absolutely breathtaking. I would love to discuss a commission for our headquarters." "I would be delighted," Victoria replied warmly, pulling out her tablet to check her schedule. "I have availability starting next month. Why don't we schedule a consultation to discuss your vision?" Richard watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Victoria handled the conversation with professionalism and grace, asking insightful questions about the space, the company culture, the emotions they wanted to evoke. This was not luck or accident. She had built something real, something successful. Entirely without his help or approval, Nathan's presence-say man approached Victoria from behind. Placing a gentle hand on her lower back, Richard recognized him immediately. Nathan Pierce, the tech billionaire whose success story was legendary in business circles. Richard had tried multiple times to secure a meeting with Pierce, hoping to pitch investment opportunities, but had never succeeded. Yet here was Nathan Pierce, looking at Victoria with unmistakable affection and pride. "How is it going?" Nathan asked her quietly. "Wonderfully," Victoria replied, her face lighting up in a way Richard had never seen during their marriage. "I have 3 potential commissions already, and the day has just started. I am not surprised." "Your work speaks for itself," Nathan said, then noticed the woman Victoria had been speaking with. "Mrs. Chen, good to see you. I hope Victoria is taking good care of you." "She certainly is," Mrs. Chen replied. "You have excellent taste, Mr. Pierce. I saw the collection she created for your headquarters. Absolutely stunning. I like to think she has excellent talent, and I simply had the good sense to recognize it," Nathan said, glancing at Victoria with warmth. Richard felt something twist in his stomach. Jealousy, regret, anger at himself. He could not quite name the emotion, but it felt like standing outside a warm house on a freezing night, watching through the window as others enjoyed what he had carelessly thrown away. The confrontation. Richard waited until Victoria was alone at her booth during a quiet moment. He approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, trying to appear casual despite the nervous energy coursing through him. "Victoria," he said. She turned, and for a moment her expression flickered with surprise before settling into polite neutrality. "Richard, I did not expect to see you here." "I attend every year," he said, then realized how defensive that sounded. "Your work is impressive." "I had no idea you were doing this." "You never asked what I wanted to do," Victoria replied simply, without bitterness or anger, just stating a fact. Richard felt the sting of truth in her words. "I saw you speaking with Nathan Pierce. How do you know him?" "He is a client." "And a friend," Victoria said, her tone making it clear she would not elaborate further. "I heard you have been quite successful. Gallery showings, magazine features." "It seems you proved me wrong," Richard said, attempting a smile that felt awkward on his face. Victoria studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "I did not set out to prove you wrong, Richard. I set out to prove something to myself. That I had value beyond being someone's accessory. That my dreams mattered. That I deserved to be treated with respect and kindness." The weight of regret, Victoria. "I have been thinking," Richard started, his voice lowering. "Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe we ended things too quickly. You look incredible, and clearly you have done well for yourself. Perhaps we could talk about giving things another chance." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly, and for the first time, a hint of sadness crossed her features. Not sadness for herself, Richard realized, but sadness for him. "Richard, do you hear yourself?" she asked gently. "You are not apologizing for how you treated me. You are not acknowledging the years of criticism and dismissal. You are simply noticing that I look different and have achieved success. And suddenly I seem worth your attention again." "That is not what I meant," Richard protested. Though deep down he knew she was right. "The problem was never whether I could succeed or be confident or command a room," Victoria continued. "The problem was that you needed me to be small so you could feel big. You needed me to fail so you could feel like my savior. My worth was always there, Richard. You just refused to see it because it threatened something in you." The mirror of truth, her words hit Richard like physical blows. He wanted to argue to defend himself, but the truth of what she said resonated in a place he had been avoiding for months. Since Victoria left, his life had felt hollow. Business was fine, but coming home to an empty apartment reminded him daily of what he had lost. He had tried dating, but every woman he met seemed to bore him, or demand too much, or fail to measure up in ways he could not quite articulate. The truth he had been avoiding was simple and devastating. He had not appreciated Victoria until she was gone. He had not valued her until he saw someone else treating her like she was precious. He had not wanted her until she no longer wanted him. "I made a mistake," Richard said quietly, the admission feeling like pulling glass from a wound. "You did," Victoria agreed. "But that mistake taught me something invaluable. It taught me that I do not need someone to see my worth for it to exist. It taught me that being alone is better than being with someone who makes me feel worthless. It taught me what real partnership looks like." Nathan appeared at Victoria's side again, his presence protective without being possessive. "Everything okay here?" he asked, looking between them. "Everything is fine," Victoria said, her voice warm as she looked at Nathan. Richard was just leaving. The final. Understanding, Richard looked at the two of them together and saw everything he had failed to give Victoria reflected in the way Nathan looked at her: respect, admiration, partnership, love. That did not require her to shrink or hide or apologize for existing fully. "I hope you will be happy," Richard said. And for the first time, he meant it without bitterness. "I already am," Victoria replied simply. Richard walked away from the booth, each step feeling heavier than the last. He left the summit early, driving aimlessly through the city as the afternoon light faded into evening. He passed their old penthouse building and felt nothing. That life, that version of himself, suddenly seemed like a stranger's memory, the lesson learned in the weeks that followed. Richard found himself thinking constantly about Victoria's words. He started therapy, something he had always dismissed as unnecessary. His therapist asked him questions that made him uncomfortable. Why did he feel the need to diminish others? What was he afraid would happen if he treated his partner as an equal? Where did his need for control come from? The answers were not easy or pleasant. Richard began to see patterns in his behavior that extended beyond his marriage to Victoria. He had built walls around himself, measuring his worth by his ability to be superior to those around him. He had confused control with strength, dominance with confidence. He saw Victoria one more time, months later, at a charity event. She wore a flowing sapphire dress, her hand intertwined with Nathan's. They moved through the crowd together, equal partners, sharing jokes and conversations with easy intimacy. When Victoria laughed, her entire face lit up with genuine joy. Nathan looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the room. Richard felt the familiar pang of regret. But it was softer now. Acceptance, rather than denial. He had lost something precious because he had been too afraid and too arrogant to appreciate it. That was a truth he would carry with him, Not as punishment, but as a reminder. A lesson learned too late for his marriage. Perhaps not too late for the rest of his life. Victoria caught his eye across the room. She gave him a small, gracious nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. They had both moved forward, though in very different directions. She had found her light. He was still searching for his, and that Richard understood with painful clarity was exactly what he deserved. The end.